Yo, what is good, everyone? This is some guy on the internet who doesn't care about his username. Today we are going to be discussing how Obsidian and Bethesda can save the Fallout franchise. There are really two major points to this video, and then a bonus point as well. These points are essential in ensuring that future entries in the Fallout franchise will have a strong foundation. This video is looking at things from an overarching perspective, as it pertains to particular details or preferences in design. There's obviously a lot of things that could be discussed, but that is not what this video is about. The major points we're discussing, if not addressed, will cause foundational issues for the franchise going forward. And these things need to be addressed in a very particular way. The points we are discussing are: 1. How to appeal to all of Fallout's divided fanbase at the same time. Number 2. How to attenuate lore issues that have arisen. And then number 3. The bonus point. The bonus point and all timestamps are linked below in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
Don't forget to subscribe and like if you enjoy the video, and be sure to check out my other videos, such as where I showcase Project True Vegas and Lone 6. Now into the points. Number 1. How to appeal to all of Fallout's divided fanbase at the same time. Due to the differences between the various Fallout titles across numerous different studios, there is now a divided fanbase looking for different experiences from a Fallout game. You have the fans of the originals, fans of Fallout 3, fans of Fallout New Vegas, fans of Fallout 4, and now even fans of the Fallout TV show. Some people may believe that it is impossible to make future games in a way where almost everyone will be happy. I'm going to lay out how this is actually possible. Obviously, there is no way to make a game that is 100% perfect for every part of the fandom, nor is that a realistic goal for any game. However, it is possible to get much closer to 100% than people may realize. The way Fallout can accomplish that is by building the game around multidimensional design and systems. In this new gaming environment, where preferences are becoming more niche than ever, this is something many studios should begin doing. Fallout especially needs to adopt this philosophy as soon as possible. The fanbase has become so thoroughly divided that this is practically a requirement at this point.
Our woman, our queen, if she breathes, she's a god!
This is something that really every studio should be doing by now. It should become common practice, and it would give many studios a larger audience, and therefore make them more money. So why has this not been more broadly adopted yet? This idea may initially sound like it would be difficult to pull off, but in reality, it really would not be. And I am going to explain how this could be accomplished with Fallout. When I say multidimensional design and systems, what it really comes down to is attributes, skills, and leveling. Then, dialogue and narrative. As it pertains to attributes, skills, and leveling, I would personally have numerous layers to this. I would probably have around 4. But to keep this example more straightforward and familiar, let's use a dual system for the sake of simplicity. That dual system would be Fallout New Vegas' system and Fallout 4's system. For anyone who does not know or needs a refresher, Fallout New Vegas uses an attribute, skill, and perk system, and Fallout 4 uses an attribute and perk system. The Fallout New Vegas system is much better for role-playing in depth. The Fallout 4 system is better for a streamlined experience. How you make both of these systems work in one game is by building the game around the more advanced system first, Then, after that, you adjust it for the less advanced system. If this hypothetically made it into the next Fallout game, I would frame the modes in-game by calling the more advanced system Role-Player Mode. And the more streamlined system would be called Exploration Mode. I would also include a prompt explaining that Role-Player Mode is the canonical mode, and that Exploration Mode is recommended for a more streamlined experience. To explain exactly how these systems would work, all you have to do is establish Fallout New Vegas' system, or Role-Player Mode, first. Then, when creating Fallout 4's system, or Exploration Mode, you transfer everything from particular skills into corresponding attributes. Whenever those skills would normally be required for a skill check, whether in dialogue or elsewhere, the corresponding attribute would be used instead. For example, say speech and barter are placed under charisma. Any speech or barter check in role-player mode would simply become a charisma check in exploration mode. This concept is pretty easy to grasp, but honestly, it would be such a massive improvement for the series. If they do not implement something similar, it would be a major oversight on Obsidian and Bethesda's part. Again, though, as I alluded to earlier, I would personally have more than a dual system. I would have numerous systems, at least 4. I have a video coming out where I detail the system I would personally create for a Fallout game, and I actually aspire to add that very system to my own mod project in the long-term future. I will link that video in the description once it is released. Now, when it comes to dialogue and narrative, this is even more important. It is slightly trickier, but it is still very doable. What I would do is give role-player mode branching dialogue options with diverse decisions and consequences, where it would be possible to have numerous outcomes and nuanced endings. Then I would have exploration mode. Things would be more streamlined, the dialogue would be less branching, and the narrative options would mostly be binary and easier to follow. This would take more work than the other system. But again, it is the same fundamental concept. You build the better system first, then you strip it down. These two concepts of multidimensional design and systems are essentially all pros, and they would be relatively easy to pull off. The only counter-argument I can think of is that someone may say the streamlined players would feel that their mode is too streamlined. My answer to that is that, by the very nature of why people prefer a Fallout 4 experience over a Fallout New Vegas experience, means they likely would not feel that way. And if they did, they would have the option to switch to role-player mode. Also, as I have already stated, I would ideally create 4 systems. I am only using 2 here for the sake of simplicity. Feel free to share anything you can think of as a counter-argument in the comments below. Ultimately, this idea has massive pros and very minor cons. This broader concept should become common practice across the industry, and I have no doubt that it eventually will. I am simply stating this sentiment ahead of its time. Now, on to the next point. Number 2. How to attenuate the lore issues that have arisen. This point has massive implications for the future of the IP. If it is not addressed in a very particular way, it could become a much larger mess than it otherwise has to be. When it comes to issues within the lore, the primary problems arise from the Fallout television show. There are certain issues from Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. But the main focus of this video is the issues revolving around the show. The way I am recommending these problems be addressed is from a realist's perspective, as though I were a developer, not from the perspective of a hardcore fan with a bleeding passion for the series. From the latter perspective, it is obvious what should be done. But realistically, that is not going to happen. So we need to be practical. The show is extremely popular. It has gone mainstream and caused Fallout's numbers to skyrocket. It is not getting decanonized. Doing so would delegitimize it, minimize its impact, and therefore reduce its profitability. The show is not going anywhere anytime soon, and Fallout fans need to be clever with their suggestions for how to attenuate the issues that have arisen. The best answer for attenuating the lore issues from the show is ultimately very simple. The details of exactly how to do it are what need to be properly laid out. In an ultimate sense, you simply never acknowledge the show in the games. Now, as it pertains to the details of how you would actually go about this, it is important that I properly frame two things: how Obsidian and Bethesda would hypothetically carry it out, and why it would even work in the first place. We will start with the latter, why it would work, and then transition into exactly how they would go about doing it. The reason simply ignoring the show would work so well is that most of the people who like the show do not seriously care about the canon of Fallout. That is not meant to be rude or elitist. It is simply the reality. If those people come over to the games and certain things from the show are not acknowledged, most of them are not going to care. But you know who will care if the show's changes to the canon begin making their way into the games. The hardcore Fallout fans who will continue playing, discussing, and modding these games for the next 10 or 20 years. They are the audience that will actually care about these contradictions and the implications they have for the broader universe. So, when it comes to this particular issue, you really need to prioritize that audience. As it pertains to the bottom line and corporate interests, you need to frame the situation in a way that keeps them happy, while also preserving the legitimacy and therefore profitability of the show.
Say something crazy like I'm wearing ladies' underwear. I'm wearing ladies' underwear.
Are you?
I most certainly am not.
It looks like you most certainly am all.
I am not.
What kind?
It's a thong. Ow.
And the way you do that is by establishing that there are conflicting histories within the Fallout universe. What you communicate to them is this: because of how communication works after the apocalypse, information is not widespread or easily verified like it is in our world. Different regions naturally have different understandings of the world's circumstances, and not every version of history is completely accurate. By communicating it this way, you are ensuring that this is in no way word salad solely being used to justify what you are actually doing. That definitely not being that the show remains canon on paper, while within the games, it is functionally non-canon. From there, you definitely do not just move into different areas completely removed from anything related to the show, completely ignoring its existence in actions, but in words declaring its validity. All jokes aside, going about things this way allows the corporate side to still say the show is canon. Most of the people who like the show are not going to care that it is never directly acknowledged, and as it pertains to the hardcore fan base, they do not have to watch every issue from the show become permanently baked into the games. Given the circumstances, this is realistically the best outcome for everyone involved. Eventually, once the show has completed its run and lost its cultural relevance, you could officially decanonize it for the long-term legacy of the franchise. If you really wanted to, you could even go a step further with making the show appear canon. You could take certain concepts from the show and implement something similar in the games. That would make it appear as though the show is being acknowledged, without ever directly acknowledging its events. A good example of how you could do this would be with the Ghoul Serum. The general concept of a serum that prevents ghouls from turning feral is not inherently bad. So, if something similar appeared in one of the games, but was implemented differently, it could reinforce the idea that the show is part of the canon, without forcing the games to directly build upon it. A quick side tangent on how I would implement the serum. I would have the serum originate in China, and it would be so sought after that, even in the post-apocalypse, small quantities of it still manage to find their way into America. Because of that, it would be extremely rare and expensive. However, the serum would not be something every ghoul needs. It would only be needed once a ghoul presumes they are reaching the point where they are beginning to turn feral. From that point forward, the serum holds back the feral process. If they cannot continue obtaining it, then the process of becoming feral continues. You could implement something like that. It would seem as though you are acknowledging the show by establishing that a ghoul serum exists, but you would still be completely ignoring how the show handled it, and introducing the concept into the games on your own terms. This same general dynamic could be applied to other ideas, where applicable. Now, on to the third and final bonus point. Number 3. How Fallout should approach wokeness. Before getting into this point, I want to give a quick background on where I am coming from. I am very far left. So obviously, I am someone who would be considered woke. A lot of people who are not far left seem to believe that there is one collective set of opinions that everyone on the left shares. But there is an enormous amount of variation in what people actually believe. The word woke has also become so hyperbolic that it can mean almost anything at this point. Sometimes it refers to genuine progressive themes. Sometimes it refers to bad writing. Sometimes it just means that a woman, minority, or gay person exists in something. So, when I discuss wokeness in games, I am not arguing that political or social topics should be removed. My issue is how they are implemented. And to make something clear, I am also not saying this because I am trying to appeal to people on the far right. I genuinely do not care whether those people like the video. They can unsubscribe, they can complain in the comments, or they can hate watch the entire thing. I do not care. My concern is creating a better game and implementing these ideas in a way that strengthens the universe rather than weakening it. A major issue in modern fiction is that writers sometimes attempt to overcorrect for the problems of older media. Most of the time, this is coming from a good place. They want more representation. They want to explore social issues. And they want the values of the work to reflect what they believe. But when that overcorrection is handled badly, it begins to look like overcompensation. Instead of the ideas naturally existing within the setting, it feels as though the writers have temporarily stopped the story to directly speak to the audience. That is where people get pulled out of the experience. There are also different standards depending on what type of game is being created. If someone is creating a completely new IP and wants the entire game to revolve around social and political issues, then they should completely put their chest out there and do it. Build the world around those ideas. Make those themes central to the story. There is nothing inherently wrong with creating a game that is extremely political or socially progressive. But when you are working with an established series, you have to consider the universe that already exists. You cannot introduce ideas in a way that feels disconnected from the established lore and the overall vibe of the setting. They need to be implemented in a way that feels as though they genuinely belong within what is already established. When it comes to Fallout specifically, Fallout has always been woke. I personally love that, because it makes far-right dipshits squeal when they realize that the series they have been enjoying has always contained these ideas. If a game exactly like Fallout New Vegas were released today as a new game, there would absolutely be people complaining that it was woke. Without the nostalgia surrounding it, the reaction from certain people would be completely different. But there are two sides to this issue: the overreaction and the overcorrection. There are reactionary people who will complain about practically any form of representation. They will overreact regardless of how well something is written, because the existence of the subject itself is what bothers them. At the same time, there are writers who genuinely implement these ideas poorly. Both things can be true. The reactionaries are often being irrational, but that does not mean every criticism of progressive writing is automatically irrational. Sometimes the writing does feel forced. Sometimes modern terminology is placed into a setting where it does not sound natural. Sometimes a character feels less like an actual person and more like a collection of messages the writer wants to communicate. The solution is not to remove the ideas. The solution is to implement them immersively. When you are adding something into an established universe, it should not feel like an insert. And I do not mean insert in the literal sense. Obviously, anything new you add to a franchise is technically being inserted. What I mean by that is when you can clearly feel that something from the real world was placed into the setting, without properly being adapted to fit the language, lore, or internal logic of that universe. In these cases, the concept itself may already make sense within the world. But what happens is, the way it is introduced makes it stand out as something coming from the writer, rather than something that naturally exists within the setting, which then leads to it feeling out of place because of how it was implemented. The way you should go about implementing these sorts of concepts is by looking at the systems and ideas that already exist within the universe. Then, you use those things to introduce the subject naturally. For example, let's look at how I would implement a new concept into Fallout. Fallout already has autodocs capable of performing incredibly advanced medical procedures. You could establish that certain specialized modules were created for them before the war. Each module would expand what the autodoc was capable of doing. One module could allow it to install a cybernetic arm. Another could allow it to perform some other advanced form of bodily reconstruction. And another could allow someone to completely transition their sex. Because these modules would now be extremely rare, you could build an entire quest around a character attempting to find one. The player could locate the module, attach it to an autodoc, and allow that person to complete their transition. That is an immersive way to add transgender people more directly into the Fallout universe. You begin with technology that already exists. You expand that technology in a way that makes sense, and then you introduce the idea through it. It would also retroactively establish that transgender people have always existed within the series. Because pre-war technology was so advanced, transitioning could have been much faster and more seamless than it currently is in real life. The reason we did not see it before would simply be that the previous games never explored that particular part of the technology, and any transgender people who existed simply were not the focus of the stories being told. That does not feel like an insert. It feels like a previously unexplored aspect of the Fallout universe. Now, are chuds still going to squeal about it? Of course they are. But at that point, they are complaining because a transgender character exists. Not because the idea was implemented poorly. You should not design the game around satisfying those people. The focus should be on making sure the idea is implemented intelligently and feels like it actually belongs within Fallout. That is how I would approach implementing these sorts of ideas into an established series like Fallout. Again, there is nothing wrong with creating an extremely woke game. If you are creating a new IP specifically built around those social issues, you can completely put your chest out and make the game about them from the beginning. But regardless of the type of game you are creating, another thing to consider is how deeply you explore these subjects. Most people are not deeply studied in political science, different social issues, psychology, or all of these other subjects. And that is not something that only applies to politics. If a game went extremely deep into science or practically any other complicated subject, there would also be a lot of people who could not understand or relate to everything being discussed. So, you have to be careful about how deeply you go and how you communicate these ideas. That does not mean removing the depth. It means presenting it in a way that people can still understand and engage with. The main focus should be making a good game and implementing these ideas properly. So, that is how I would personally handle wokeness in Fallout. Do not remove these ideas because reactionary people complain about them. But also do not implement them in a way that feels unnatural or disconnected from the universe. Make them feel like they actually belong within Fallout. And those are the 3 main points of the video. First, Fallout needs numerous systems built for its different audiences. The more advanced role-playing system should serve as the foundation, and the more casual systems should be streamlined versions of it. Second, the games should functionally ignore the television show's changes to the lore, while keeping it canon on paper. They can occasionally use similar concepts in completely different ways to make it appear acknowledged. And third, Fallout should continue being woke, but these ideas need to be implemented immersively and within the established bounds of the universe. Be sure to leave your thoughts on all 3 points in the comments.